really, if I were to boil it all down, it all comes down to common sense. If you're going to be looking for water intrusion,
I think you take a step over common sense line when you have to start predicting where it's going to come in. When you start looking, like Charles said.
And as an educator, I want to caution people, as sometimes you just have to bite your tongue and realize that these people are coming at it from a different perspective they don't have.
So we're going to get started, folks. Those of you who are in the group, hope you've clicked on over to our link in the open forum. We have a link in there for you to join us on YouTube. Hi, I'm Gary Smith, and we're in the house bringing you fresh perspectives on the latest inspection news and events. And today, I'm here with Reuben Saltzman, Dusty Jameson, and Charles Buell. Reuben operates a multi-inspector company in Minnesota. Dusty works in a multi-inspector firm in Knoxville, Tennessee area. Charles is in Washington State in the Seattle area. I'm in central Mississippi, and Charles and I operate a single inspector company. And today we are here to talk about using common sense when operating your inspection business. And I smile on that one because you know that it's always good. Thank you for joining us today in our Sunday open mic show. Hi guys.
Hello.
All right.
Yo.
Yeah.
Yo. So I want to start out by saying that I want to define common sense from the dictionary. So we say common sense is defined as sound practical judgment that is independent of specialized knowledge, training, or the like, normal native intelligence. So when we talk about, using common sense as an inspector, our task at hand is to mix the training and the continuing ed and all the efforts we go to offer our clients sound advice based on, our background and along with a good dose of common sense. And that's usually, hopefully, is what you want your end result in the report. So I'll start off with an example. So you inspect a furnace and you find rust on the burners. Water runs downhill. Now, I know that might sound overly simplified, but using common sense to identify the source, right? So give me some other examples of why you think or having common sense is important as an inspector. Got any ideas?
and I think that what you're after here is not so much business, but actual identification of defects. Correct? That's kind of where we're after. What we're after here.
Yeah, just how you carry on your business. I mean, you're going to be using some common sense in it.
But the very nature of what we do is so technical and requires so much education and training. It by nature it excludes common sense in a sense, because it's not something that's basic and that everybody should know, born with, or however you want to look at it. So,
all right, Charles, you can excuse yourself from the conversation then.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I'll throw this out there. This is there's a whole 1-hour class that I teach to real estate agents, and I'm hoping to teach this class at Inspection World next year. It's a 2-hour class. I taught it at my chapter, and I think it's largely common sense, and it's finding water intrusion in the exterior envelope. It's to kind of complement the class that Mark Harley has taught at Inspection World many times.
Right.
And really, if I were to boil it all down, it all comes down to common sense. If you're going to be looking for water intrusion in the exterior envelope, the very first thing you do is you figure out where all the water goes. And I think that's a lot of common sense. When you drive up to the house, you look at the roof line and you think about where all the water ends up. And I don't know why it is today, but there is no common sense in the way that new homes are built today. you take all of the roof lines, all of the valleys, and all of the water, and at least in the Midwest here, I don't know about you guys, but in the Midwest, we design new houses where you take all of the water and you converge it right to the middle and you deposit it right to the front door.
You funnel it. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So if you're going to be looking for signs of basement water intrusion, don't start in the backyard at the basement walkout. Common sense tells you you start right underneath the front door at the front of the house.
Yeah. Water runs downhill. Yeah.
If you find basement water intrusion, that's the first place you look. And if it's all dry there, well, I can feel pretty good about the rest of the house.
Right.
And you carry that on and you say, all right, if we're going to find water intrusion at the walls, if I'm going to take my moisture meter and I'm going to use it at the exterior walls and scan through vinyl siding and whatnot, am I going to check these areas with big overhangs? Am I going to check the windows right here? Heck no. I'm going to start at the big gable end wall that gets pounded, or even worse, I'm going to check right below the areas where the missing kickout flashing, where a lot of water gets directed. And much of that. Go ahead, Charles.
Reuben, lots of times people don't even know which way the prevailing winds are, which way the weather comes from for most houses. And this to me is like beyond imagination, that people don't know which side the sun comes up on in the morning and what side it sets at night. But this is the world we live in. There's no, and I call it good sense more than common sense, because we're trained to know this stuff and figure this stuff out. The average, obviously, builders aren't.
Dusty.
That's what I was thinking. You're actually, so Reuben's, what he was talking about, finding the water entry, that's more reactionary. You find where it's coming. You look for the results. I think you take a step over common sense line when you have to start predicting where it's going to come in. When you start looking, like Charles said, directional of the house. It's when you also get into installation, stucco, all this masonry siding that we're seeing all the time. It may not have made its way in yet, but we have to look at it from a technical standpoint. Where is it going to come in? So I think that's where you step over the line of common sense will tell us, all right, look for water at these spots. But when we get a little more technical, a brand new house, we got to start breaking it down to, well, I think it's going to come in here because this is installed wrong.
Well, let's back up to Gary's statement about the rust. Let's say you take the electrical panel cover off and there's all this rusting in the panel, and you immediately think, well, how's the water getting in here? Well, maybe it's water that's bulk water coming in, or maybe it's just condensation because the panel's cold. This is where it goes beyond common sense. It's training and experience, and knowing that oftentimes there's multiple possibilities, and you don't know the forest for the trees.
Well, the seed thought, or the seed idea of putting together the topic for today was some of the stuff that we filter in the big group that we're in. Obviously, for those of you who are on our podcast, we have a large home inspector group on Facebook, and we have some really, really active participation in it, and we're proud to have that there. And if you look us up on Facebook, it's Today's Home Inspector. The page is Today's Home Inspector, and you have links there to the two groups that we manage. And most of that information that we get, some of the questions are rather rudimentary. They're rather simple questions if the poster stops for a few minutes and thinks about the type of question. So that led us to this topic, and I thought it would make a good topic. Charles and I both kind of discussed the opportunity to say, how far do we take our training, and are we so involved in it? Are we so focused on having continuing ed and the technical training that we don't stop for a second, like Reuben has mentioned earlier, and look at it from a real practical standpoint. So for new inspectors, if you're beginning in your careers as a home inspector, don't be overwhelmed by, I can't find the answer to this in the book. A lot of your stuff you will use, hopefully you'll draw from some basic good sense like Charles has mentioned?
It's a complicated issue because you got guys that come in and ask these questions that you just say, whoa, how can this possibly being asked by anybody, an inspector or otherwise? And as an educator, I want to caution people, as sometimes you just have to bite your tongue and realize that these people are coming at it from a different perspective. They don't have your good sense yet, and they never will if they get hammered adversely and they lose interest
in our group. Yeah. Right. So we have conversations in the group. It's like, just be patient.
Yeah, absolutely, because none of us knows it all, so we're all going to be not have common sense at some point, and those examples show up. I never pass up an opportunity to embarrass myself. It's the nature of the beast.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It points to lack of general education and training from the get-go. We don't, as a profession, have a standard that's anywhere near what's necessary to start in this business.
So you're saying that some of the seed thoughts or some of the support that you might get if it wasn't common sense would be better training. Is that where you're going?
I think that it's absolutely essential that if our profession is to survive and actually become a real profession, that we have to start at a much higher level than we throw people out into the world today. Whether it's Reuben or Dusty or you or me, we've all achieved what we have because of the School of Hard Knocks, not because of what we learned before we started.
So that might be even common sense for the profession itself. So in a broader sense,
or a better sense.
In a broader sense that the profession should be looking at ways to that it wouldn't be very commonsensical to expect the profession to grow without investing in a real meaningful way in education. Just relying on common sense. That'd be,
Yeah, you're not going to get there by trying to figure it out on the forums. You're just not. It's you might get the right information, but you're just as likely to get bad information. And we see it every day where somebody says.
let's take another dive at it. Let's take another stab at this. Is it common sense for a homeowner or a seller to have a pre-purchase inspection? Would that be common sense? Would that be common sense for our profession?
I don't even know if it's
good. Should we be focusing the amount of time that we're focusing on trying to develop or have some kind of focus on having pre-listing inspections? Where does that fall into play? Anybody got any comments?
I just worry that pre-listing inspections are going to be all over the place in terms of quality, just like real inspections are. If there's not some sort of expectation that they're not just going to be walkthrough inspections or the reports are going to be mediocre, but it's a can of worms.
Because of the type of inspection. Reuben, go ahead.
You can make that exact same argument about home inspections, period. You could say.
Exactly.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I do.
So, Charles, how do you feel that that's a knock against pre-listing inspections?
Well, only because it's just, if we're going to improve it and do something different, let's affect the quality of it. But I guess there really isn't any reason. If we're not going to tackle the whole beast, why attempt to tackle part of it?
Do you think it might be the business model that's being introduced in some of the pre-listing inspection protocols that seem to be they're beginning to kind of rise to the top, where there is the word free is being thrown in. There is maybe a minimum inspection rate that an inspector would acquire. In other words, you're going to pay the guy a flat fee to go in and do a pre-listing. does a flat fee or a free inspection to someone automatically mean that is a lesser of an inspection? Would that be, is that?
Well, it certainly encourages it. I don't know whether it guarantees it, but.
What do you think, Reuben?
I can't comment on that. I really don't know. Anytime something's free, the perceived value certainly goes down.
Right.
There's no question about that. But
Right.
yeah, I can't answer that question.
I mean, it's not really any different than the perceived perception that if it's really expensive, it's more valuable. You know, that can also not necessarily be accurate. You know, it might not be true, but I think most people figure if you're paying a lot of money for something, there must be more value to it, but it might not be true.
Well, we've
So,
tried to.
Go ahead, Dusty.
Well, I was going to say we've tried pushing pre-listing inspections for years. I mean, we've always wanted to do, and I still, to this day, it's still a great idea, but the nature of the beast is that owners don't want to do it. I mean, they would rather take the chance that the person who the buyer hires, that they won't find what may be wrong.
Well, I've had a huge number of clients that actually wanted to have them, but then their agents talk them out of them.
Exactly.
So it's not the client that can't be talked into them. It's the agents that, so there's some of these newer programs out there that are trying to circumvent the agents.
Right.
So we're having a party, and there are a bunch of folks coming to this party. You got the inspectors, you got the owner, you got the seller, you got the agent, and everyone's got an opinion about it.
Yeah. And they're all wrong.
So we're, yeah, and they're all wrong except the inspector. Yeah, no, yeah. Yeah, well, that's common sense.
Especially,
sure.
Especially the inspector.
Yeah. Yeah. So what other examples of using common sense in our profession or in what we do are applicable? You know, obviously we kind of talked a minute about not being able to, you know, like if you transfer, if you're an inspector, and some of the common sense stuff that you know in Mississippi, I probably couldn't apply it in San Francisco, or so that might be some things that you would need to be prepared for if you're in the process of expanding a multi-inspector firm like you guys have, and you were in other markets. You would need to know what the local, you know, what the local habits are and what the local common sense stuff, like do you have parking rules, things like that. Those are all kind of rudimentary things, but it does still play into growing a business. You guys are dying on me here.
I'm sorry, I don't.
The common sense is tough on you, isn't it?
It is. It is. You got the wrong group here for this.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think we've talked about this so much offline that it's a little bit hard to egg each other on, but somebody needs to play devil's advocate, I guess.
Well, I proposed the concept of the pre-listing only because I am getting some information through social about how that Zillow may do some things, and how that other companies may do some things, and we need to be prepared to be able to create our own focus or our own marketing process for this new wave that is hitting the home inspection profession. And I am trying to make common sense knowledge of that, and it's not sticking with me personally.
Yeah,
So I thought I'd throw that out there for you guys. It just doesn't seem like that is a common sense approach because of the way that our real estate processes seem to be, their history of real estate transactions has not been where a seller would come in and say, hey, come check out my house, I've had it inspected, and the inspector would say, I'll go out there and inspect it for a reduced fee.
Well, some of these programs seem almost reactionary as opposed to creative. I see them as an attempt to keep things the way they are in terms of cash flow or money streams, and being
which ones do you think feel the same way?
well, I think all the ones I've read little bits about related to doing pre-listing inspections seem to be trying an attempt to get the agents out of the picture. And I don't have a problem with agents being out of the picture, but I have a problem with collecting data and the use of that data in ways that we don't control. I just
and the data collection is handled by, or we seem to be very loosely throwing around large, huge names like Porch and Zillow and these national companies in the context of home inspector conversations. And that is different. That's not something that we as a collective community have really tossed about among ourselves. This has only come to bear in the last couple of years that we have included these big names where it's big money and they're obviously collecting big data. And, you know, what I was hoping that, you know, or what I see, you know, whatever, is that we have to be very careful how we don't become a conduit for that data collection, and that's all we're needed for.
Well, yeah, and we forget the inspection entirely. I mean, isn't that why we're here, to do inspections?
That's what it felt like when you start talking about all of that. You just step over into this whole other realm. It's marketing. It's a conduit, like you said, it's an avenue to sell leads and to collect data. It just completely gets rid of the inspection process, or just minimizes, I guess
or even encourages minimal inspection.
Yep, exactly. It basically lowers that bar that we were talking about earlier, the common sense bar. It's going to go back down because we're too busy marketing and selling leads and doing all of the things we've got to do on Zillow. Well,
and it puts you in a position where if everybody's doing minimal inspections, then the competition just gets crazy, and price you start having price wars, and you know, it's I don't think we need to go there, and I don't want to see us go there.
I think the market would weed out people who are doing really crummy pre-listing inspections. If you're just glossing over a house, and then and you catch half of the stuff that you should be catching, and then another home inspector comes in after you and finds a whole boatload of stuff that you should have found, you're going to look really stupid. And the listing agent is going to know about it, the buyer's agent is going to know about it, and word's going to get out that these are worthless. I truly believe that the market will get rid of people like that.
Yeah, I think you're right. Absolutely right, Reuben.
Well, I think the market just gets rid of the whole pre-sale inspection in general. I mean, there is a market for it. We do probably, I don't know, maybe 10% of our work is a pre-listing inspection, and we've tried to push it for years, but it basically just stops that before it even gets there. People don't want pre-listing inspections. That's just the nature of it.
Yeah. I think it's a matter of educating the public and really letting them know what the value in this is. Once people understand the value, that's when things are going to change.
Yeah. And I think that's where it all comes down to. You don't have to worry about improving inspector associations and licensing laws and all that. You just educate the consumer to want more.
Sure.
And let the other guys follow along. That's the way it's always worked.
Yeah, it's good perspective. And if we do not have this platform and we do not talk about it now, when are we going to talk about it? I think is the point I was making, and that's great, good perspective, guys.
Well, and Charles, I got to ask two things. You talk about how we need to step up the whole profession. People need way more training before they go out inspecting on their own. But you also say that the home inspection organizations don't need to be focused so much on that. But I say, which one is it?
No, I think
Am I
they
getting you
do.
wrong?
I think they do need to focus more on
All
education.
right.
Yeah. No,
Okay.
I'm just saying the associations tend to respond as opposed to create. Whether it's ASHE or NACHE or whoever, I would like to see them take the bull by the horns and say, look, you want to inspect, you got to have X numbers of hours of mentoring before you can get your cert or your approval to be a full ASHE member or whatever. Get some guts behind what we do.
One of the things that I think is really lacking, at least here in Minnesota, I don't know how it is in other parts of the country, but I think it's about the same way, is training for home inspectors after they go to a 1-week school. What the heck are you supposed to do after that? There's no way you can go out and start inspecting houses.
That's right.
You need to go along with other inspectors. I mean, when I train people in my company, they go along on about 150 to 200 inspections. And that's what it takes. And it's people really coaching the heck out of these new inspectors to get them to the point where I'm comfortable having them inspect for me. I have no idea how you could go out on your own and get the right training. I get people calling and asking me that multiple times a week. Ask me, what do I need to do to get trained as a home inspector? And I still don't have a good answer for these people. I have no idea what to tell them.
Here's a model that I've been working with, because I do some training for licensing here from other schools that don't provide the field training, and I have them come to me and I say, find a house and we'll go and spend 8 hours at it and we'll tear it all apart and you'll pay me $600. And this is a model that actually works, but it requires that home inspectors coming into the field be aware that it costs money to get to know what you need to know to do this.
And how many of those do you think somebody ought to do with you before they go out on their own?
I think at least 25, 25 8-hour days. That's a lot of hours. That's a lot of training, and it's a lot of money too. But if you were going to go to college and become a hairdresser, you're going to spend more money than that.
And the potential income return, is equally as I mean, when you're going to go, I guess it's according to what you intend to do with your license or what you intend to do with your certification, or in some states, nothing. You're just going to do it because they don't have certifications or licenses.
Right.
It's, I guess, Charles's point, I'm taking it as, you'll make that money back pretty quickly because, we don't starve as home inspectors.
Well, how long does it take for a doctor to pay back his education? I mean, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's just part of what you got to do. And we've kind of built this culture of people that think they can come into this with a clipboard and a flashlight and start making $75,000 a year. And that's not realistic or a reality at all.
Yeah, and you think that and when you go back to the theme of the show, common sense about it, but you think that's not practical for a purchaser. It wouldn't be fair to not only our profession, but
it's not fair to anybody.
So we're at that that place where you say, well, it's uncomfortable knowing this, and we talk about it, and it's part of why we're here. And I do appreciate, your being here with us today to talk about these topics, because they're so important to the future of our profession. And your opinion matters.
It's a two-headed monster too, because you talk about training and actually, like Reuben was talking about, being able to inspect after 150 or 200 houses. You're finally able to inspect a house by yourself. You may not know how to run a business. I mean, it's a two-headed monster. You've got to be able to run the business too at the same time as just fresh out of school, just learning how to do an inspection. So, I mean, all four of us, we can comfortably do a home inspection. We also have businesses to run as well. So, people coming out, they think, okay, I've got the inspection process down. They may not have a clue on, how to do financing, how to do the books. I mean, so that's part of it as well. You've got to manage and learn on that. plus the inspection side too.
None of the inspection schools prepares a student for the size of cojones you have to do this business.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there's also another slippery slope that I've talked about in the group that I don't know really. I'm not a student enough or something, because I'm not getting my point across. And that is the challenges of dealing with code versus not code. And we're not code inspectors, but we're code as a way to defend ourselves when we're talking standing flat-footed. So I wanted to ask you two guys, the multi-inspector firms, how you talk to your new recruits coming in about the conversations that you may wind up having in the field in relation to maybe other code officials, maybe the code officials there, or maybe a builder's there. And there is a conversation about building codes and how that doesn't apply in my area or whatever. How do you guys do that?
Well, for me, I think the best training that you could have, or the best thing that I could tell a new hiree would be watch me, get to see it in person. Mm-hmm. I can talk about it. We can be riding to an inspection and I can tell them what I'm prepared to say. But when it comes down to it, when I'm standing in front of that builder, what comes out is kind of what comes out. Now, what's supposed to come out is that, I'm not there to enforce a code, but I have to have a working knowledge of the code to do my job properly. And that kind of ventures over into that realm of common sense.
Mm-hmm.
What's common sense when you know the code book, or a certain aspect of the code front to back. What would be common sense at that point was drastically different than somebody who doesn't know that code book. Charles has said it many times. I've seen him say it. If you don't know the code, how do you know something? How do you know to write something up? So just that basic premise is what I am telling the guys that we're hiring is, we're not there to enforce the code, but when we're looking for answers, I know for myself personally, when I dig into a code book and I'm trying to find an answer, I get lost looking at 7 other different things that I'm just happened to glance over and thought, oh, I remember seeing that a week ago. And I'll start digging into that and learn a few things. So that's what I tell anybody that's riding with me is that, we're not there to enforce it, but like you said, if a builder's on site or if there's a situation that I'm at an inspection and it comes up, hopefully they'll get to see and learn and kind of see how that whole thing transpires.
What I tell all of my inspectors is you're not responsible for quoting codes in your reports or during your inspections, but you better know it. Because, if you go back to the basic standard of practice, we follow the ASHI standard of practice. You need to report on things that are significantly deficient. And if you're not going to go back to the code to define what's significantly deficient, what are you going to go back to? Mm-hmm. And if somebody wants to put the screws to you and, you called this out as being flashed improperly, how are you going to prove it? You better be able to go back to some type of code book to prove it. But it makes our job much more difficult. I tell everybody I'm training that this is a lot more difficult than simply knowing code. This is a matter of knowing why the code says this, because everything we put on our report, it's 3 things. What's the issue? Why does it matter? And what do you do about it? And it's that why does it matter part. You can't say because it's code. We're not code inspectors. Sure, that's the easy way to do it. It's really simple to just cite a code section and say there because it's code, but that doesn't give your client any useful information. You need to explain why it matters. You need to understand the reasoning behind the code. That's what makes our job so challenging. And that's what I tell all my inspectors. You got to do a lot of reading. You got to have a good understanding before you call something out as a defect. You can't lean on code.
So you're being paid the bucks, where the buck stops here is the ability to communicate that what you found with the basis or the foundation of the code under you, standing on it, it, and then you'll be able to communicate that effectively and not put yourself in a position that becomes argumentative or coming off like Charles has said before. Charles, I can't remember how you said it. You enforce it versus you mentioned it in in a topic the other day. I was reading it. It was like,
well, we're not code enforcers, but we have to know the code. You know,
yeah,
we're
yeah.
code, we are code inspectors.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you said it.
Yeah, no, it's a sad, hard truth. But this kind of gets to the business models that don't allow an inspector the time to actually look up the codes when they have a question. That's a critical issue. So it's kind of sad, really, that we actually have where mediocre is acceptable, where inspectors can go out there and do a report and not figure things out and
Not speak in full sentences.
yeah, and nobody gets in trouble because the public isn't educated to expect more, so mediocre is okay.
And that's the responsibility of the inspector to put that together. It's the responsibility of the association, the profession. Who's responsible for the public still not understanding what you're talking about?
Inspectors, I'd say. I mean, I'd like to say the associations, but the associations are only going to respond. They're not going to create.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's, I'm challenging them. I want to see them actually.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting topics.
Like,
we're about the end of the show. Dusty, go ahead.
I was going to say, like Reuben was talking about when he trains his guys, you need to know the code, but you also need to know why it is a code. Why is flashing details? Why does that particular flashing detail matter? When somebody deep down knows those issues and knows the installation front to back on why it goes together, it becomes common sense to them at that point. You can cite a code, sure, to back you up, but at that point, there's common sense. I can tell somebody, if there's not step flashing, the water is going to come in here because of X, Y, Z. So it becomes common sense at that point. Before, I think you're into it's not common sense. When you're just quoting a code, that's not common sense. That's just, I can read a page.
But it becomes your individual common sense.
Exactly.
Not group common sense. And that's the issue I have with common sense, is the notion it actually can become sexist or racist or a host of things when you assume that everybody should know something, because it's just not true.
Good thoughts. Thank you, guys. Thank you, folks, for tuning in. We'll be here next week, Sunday at 3 p.m. Talk soon.